Okay, well, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen here. I'm going to bring you guys through some slides. So as an MAPS coach, one of my specialties is operations. Oh, I'm Paula Grimes, you guys, by the way. And as a MAPS coach, one of my specialties is operations. And one of the biggest struggles or challenges I see in operations is figuring out operational KPIs. So my goal today for you guys is to bring you through the why. Why are they important? What they are? How do we determine what they are? And then we're going to end with how do we use them in our business? We have a lot of ground to cover in 30 minutes. So if we don't have time for questions at the end, I'm going to leave you guys with my email, and you're more than welcome to shoot me any questions you may have. And I promise I will get back to you. So let's start with why are KPIs important? So first of all, KPIs clearly communicate the results that we expect to our team members. So for all of you director of operations, right, it's those people you're managing, their KPIs clearly communicate the results we expect from them. For you rainmakers, it's clearly communicating the results you expect from them. How many of you guys have kids? Okay, if you don't have kids, you were kids, so you'll be able to relate. So the summer before my 8th grade year, my family moved across country, and I was in a new town, new school, new friends, and my grades that first quarter of school were not very good. And my dad sat me down and said, "Hey, Paula, these grades are not going to get you into college." It was the first time in my life that I realized my dad had an expectation of me. Right? What expectation do you have of your kids that's not been clearly communicated to them? It was at that point in my life that it was clearly communicated to me that that was an expectation my dad had of me. And the KPI around that was my grade point average, right? So I became aware in that moment in time of the expectation he had of me and what KPI he expected from me. So think about your kids. What expectations do you have of them that they don't realize you have? And they don't, even if they knew you had that expectation, they don't understand what they need to do to achieve that expectation. Same with your people on your team. Second of all, it tells our people how they win in their role. Operations people love to win in their role. We love it. So when it's clearly communicated to us what the expectation is and what the metric is for us to win, we're all over it. So KPIs clearly tell our people how they win in their role. Third, it shows the team what each role is going to do to grow the business. So we create sales KPIs all the time, right? How many conversations do you need to have? How many agreements do you need signed? How many houses do you need to close? We create it in the sales world all the time, and they're pretty clear. Where the struggle is what are the operational ones? And when we have operational KPIs and it's communicated to the whole team, everybody realizes they're into the business growth together. And it brings sales and operations together cohesively. It also will reduce finger pointing when things get hard, right? How many of you guys experienced that this last year, where people started pointing fingers at each other because last year was a hard year? 2023 was a challenging year for a lot of us. And lastly, it makes the accountability conversations we have weekly really easy. It is really easy for operations to get stuck in the weeds. Even if we time block, right? We come into our day and we have so much stuff going on that it's really easy to get stuck in the weeds. What those weekly conversations do is pull us out of the weeds, pull operations out of the weeds and into strategy conversations. They pull us into big picture conversations. And I can't tell you how important those weekly conversations are. They make our team members feel really valued, and they keep us focused on the big picture. So let's talk about job description versus KPI real quick. So job descriptions tell us the tasks, duties, functions, responsibilities of a position. Job descriptions tell us the tasks, duties, function, responsibilities of a position. A KPI, a key performance indicators, are measurable results that we expect from each position on our team that show how that position will grow in the business. A key performance indicator are measurable results that we expect from each position on our team that show how that position will grow in the business. They are two different things. It doesn't mean that the key performance indicators can't be part of our job description, yet they are two different things. A recommendation for all of you: in our jobs, our roles change throughout the year, right? We have things added to our plate, things are taken off our plate. So our job descriptions actually change throughout the year. We should be updating those annually, and I would suggest having each of your team members update their own job description. They should be making it the most pertinent for the time you're at. And it's also a great time for everyone to add their key performance indicators to their job description. So having a section in their job description that has their key performance indicator for that next year. Okay, so let's talk about what are KPIs. KPIs are specific to a role. So you are not going to have a transaction coordinator's KPI be making cold calls, right? That's not specific to their role. So we want to make sure whatever KPIs our people have, it's very specific to their role. We also want it within total control of the person in that role. We want it to be SMART. So we want it to be specific, measurable, achievable, results focused, and timely. So specific, measurable, achievable, results focused, and timely. Specific. We want anybody who's looking at that KPI, whether they're on our team or off our team, to understand what the KPI is. It should be so specific, anybody could look at it and would understand it. It needs to be measurable. There needs to be some sort of metric around it. That's the only way we're going to know whether we're achieving it or not. It needs to be achievable. So for all you rainmakers out there who love setting that really high goal that you will never attain, but you know you're going to work so hard to get it, that you're actually going to achieve more than you would otherwise. That is not how operation minds work. Operations want achievable goals. So we want to make sure the KPI is achievable. We want to make sure it's results focused. And we want to make sure it's timely. Not all KPIs are going to be annual KPIs, something we're going to accomplish in a year, right? A KPI might be something we need to accomplish in 12 weeks or 6 months. So we want a time associated with that. And lastly, we want it owned by the person in the role. The buck stops there. Whether the goal is achieved or not achieved, it's owned by the person in the role. Okay. So then, let's talk about who decides what the KPI is. And we're going to put this into 2 buckets. So one is going to be new employees, people who've been in their role for less than a year. And then we're going to look at employees that have been in their role for more than a year. New employees coming in are not going to know what their KPI should be. So we're always going to tell a new employee what their KPIs are. And we're going to be really clear in that time frame, right? just like we do the 30, 60, 90, we're going to be really clear. Hey, this is what we want you to achieve in 90 days. This is 6 months. This is a year. Employees that have been in their role for more than a year should be empowered to create their own KPIs. You guys, as director of operations, as rainmakers, it doesn't mean you're not going to coach them through it. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have a say in the KPI. But when we can come up with our own KPIs, we own them, right? The buy-in is there. So we want to empower our staff, our employees to create their own KPIs. This is where we get to be coaches. So how do we decide what the KPIs are? So here's some positions on teams, right? Transaction coordinator, manager, marketing coordinator, director, listing coordinator, director of operations, director of sales, ISA, OSAs, executive assistants. There's more than are on here. And yet all of these positions should have KPIs. So how do we determine what the KPIs are? So I'm going to start with the transaction coordinator or manager because they're the ones we're most familiar with. And I'm going to start reviews and referrals as an example of a KPI because that's another one we're all very familiar with. So let's say I have a team doing, I'm going to put this in me. Let's say my team is doing 150 transactions in 2023, resulting in 20 reviews and 10 referrals. That's 13% reviews and 8% referrals. For 2024, as the TC on this team, I decide my goal is to increase my reviews to 50% and referrals to 25%. You guys notice how I used percentages here? Percentages are great because they can flex with our bigger numbers, like our goals. However, we need to always break them down into numbers. So to say I'm going to do 50% reviews and 25% referrals is great, but that's a really ambiguous number. So we want to break it down. And let's say my team's going to do 200 transactions in 2024. That means I'm going to want to do 100 reviews and 50 referrals. Do you guys see what a big jump that is? From 20 reviews to 100 reviews and 10 referrals to 50 referrals. And yet I've come up with this number on my own. What happens when I do this? What happens when I set this KPI for myself is it causes me to ask myself some questions. It causes me to ask, what do I need to do differently to hit my goal? Right? Because I can't keep doing the same thing I did last year. I'm going to end up with 20 reviews and 10 referrals. So it causes me to ask myself, what do I need to do differently to hit my goal? And then what systems and processes do I need to change to hit my goal? My transactions are going up this year from 150 to 200, and I've just put a big KPI in front of myself, right? I'm going to need to look at my systems and processes and decide where I need to be more efficient. And then lastly, who do I need to be to hit my goal? This is a really important question, you guys. Who do I need to be to hit my goal? Do I need to be more intentional? Do I need to be more assertive? Like, who as a person do I need to be to hit my goal? So I want you guys to see how when this KPI is put out there, what it does to me, it makes me start thinking differently. It causes me to think more strategically. For you rainmakers, director of operations, operations managers, as a supervisor, right? These are the questions you should be asking their people if they're not asking them themselves. You should be asking them this. If they come to you with a KPI, these are great coaching questions for you to ask them. Hey, Paula, what do you need to do differently to hit your goal this year? Hey, Paula, who do you need to be to hit your goal this year? So as my supervisor, then how easy is it to meet with me weekly and measure my progress, right? We take that 50 reviews, let's say we bring it out, that's one review a week. So I need to, referral, 50 referrals, one referral a week. So we take my goal of one referral a week, you're meeting with me weekly and we're looking, did I hit my referral goal? What do I need to do differently this next week to hit my goal if I didn't hit it? If I'm knocking it out of the park, should we talk about raising my goal? So it makes those weekly conversations really easy. And you, as a director of operations, as a rainmaker, can help with strategy shifts. And you can support me in being accountable to the goal that I set for myself. Okay, so let's talk about investment versus expense for a minute. What is an expense? An expense is something in our business that costs us money that's not going to bring us a return. An investment is something that we know is going to bring us a return. It's going to bring business into our business. People are an investment. Employees are an investment. They should be bringing a return on the salary we pay them. This is how we figure out KPIs. So in MREA, Gary talks about a 4-time return on our investments. So what does this mean with our people when we're helping them figure out KPIs? Start by taking their salary, multiplying it by 4, dividing it by your average commission, and you come up with a number of transactions that their activities are going to do to bring in business. It gives you a starting place. So let's say I'm going to use simple numbers here, so the numbers may not make sense. So let's say I'm a transaction coordinator making $30,000 a year. We multiply that 4, that's 120,000. Let's say my average commission is $10,000. That means I need to bring in 12 transactions a year. So if we go back to my previous goal as a transaction coordinator, and I said to the team, I'm going to bring in 50 referrals through my actions this year, right? Well, I'm knocking that out of the park. But let's say we didn't know what the goal would be. Well, now I know it's 1 referral a month to hit a 4-time return on my salary. So this will give you guys a starting place as you're meeting with your employees to sit down, figure out what a 4-time return is on their salary and break it down for them. And when you break it down into transactions and say, okay, Paula, you're responsible for bringing in 12 transactions this year. How do you think you can do that? And it allows me some thinking time to figure out, hey, how am I going to grow the business by 12 transactions through the activities that I'm going to do? Okay, KPIs are often more than one thing. So let's say I was going to bring in 6 referrals to the team this year and I had a 6 transaction gap, right? I might say, okay, I'm going to bring in 6 referrals through asking for referrals, and then I'm going to bring 6 people in through my sphere, 6 friends and family, right? So now I have 2 KPIs. So KPIs can be more than one thing. What I do suggest is you don't get into too many things. Just like we don't want our salespeople to have more than 5 lead leverages, I would say don't have more than probably 3 KPIs. Otherwise, our focus gets too diluted and we may not succeed at any of them. Also, I'm using referrals and business from Sphere because it's easy to use. I've had KPIs be things like, hey, 80% of our closings aren't closing on time. We keep pushing out the closings, right? So the KPI might be, hey, we want to get that number down because it's off. We want to get that number down to, we want only 10% of our closings to get pushed, right? So 90% of our closings are closings on the scheduled closing date. So if you see a gap in your business, a gap in that role, that's going to be growing the business. So it may be filling that gap. And that's why I said sometimes it's a short KPI, not a longer KPI. So you got to look at where your business is, where you guys need to go, grow, where you might have gaps in your business that are keeping you from growing. So let's talk about the marketing coordinator, manager, director for a second. Because in the org model, Gary doesn't even talk about this position, and yet so many teams have this position. And it makes sense. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It makes sense to have that position. However, I strongly feel we look at that position wrong, right? When we hire a marketing person to come into our business, their entire job is to grow our business. That is the whole purpose of their job. And yet in so many teams that have a marketing coordinator, manager, director, what they focus on is making everything pretty, making sure our branding is consistent, and they don't hold them accountable to growing the business at all. And I'm not saying those things aren't important, right? Our branding being consistent, our branding being nice is important, yet what's more important in their role is that they're growing the business. Everything they do, you guys, is measurable. Everything they do is measurable. And some things are very easy to measure because it relates directly to a transaction, and others are more ambiguous. So let's say we have leads coming to a website and we can measure those leads coming in and we can measure how many of those leads turn into a closing. That's super easy to measure, right? The likes we get or interaction we get on Facebook is not easy to measure. And yet there are analytics around there, right? So in their role, everything is measurable, and yet not everything is tied directly to a closing. So what can we measure in the marketing world? Any leads that they're bringing in from anything they're doing, right, that relate directly to closings, those are the easy ones. Website leads to visitors, again, easy ones. Referrals received at or due to events. You guys, I cannot tell you what a big change I see in teams when they start to look at events as referral makers. Yes, we want to give back to our clients. Yes, we want to say thank you. And just going into every event with a goal of how many referrals we're going to get out of it changes the whole way that we approach the event. We start to add little things in that actually create the referrals. It changes our conversations at the events. So when we go into events with a goal of referrals, we actually achieve that. When we go in without a goal, we don't achieve anything because we never had a goal to begin with. Our marketing people should be really into social media analytics at this point in history, right? We want to be looking at how much interaction we're getting on social media. If we're doing posts all the time and getting no interaction, why are we doing them? So we want to look at the posts that we're getting a lot of interaction on, and we want to be increasing those. We want to do more of those. And the ones that we're not getting any interaction on, we want to be doing less of those. And then lastly, database conversion. Your database is your greatest asset. If you were to sell your business tomorrow, that's what they're going to value the business on, is the database. So we want to create as much conversion from the database as possible. And in this example, I gave that under marketing, right? If we don't have a marketing person, who does that fall under? Often it'll fall under their director of operations, right? That might be a KPI for a director of operations, is that database conversion. Okay, so back to why are KPIs important? Again, they clearly communicate the results we expect to our team members. They tell our people how they win in their role. I had a rainmaker come up to me once, and she was very upset with her operations manager because he wasn't growing her business. And I asked her how he was doing otherwise, and she goes, he's doing phenomenal otherwise. He's just not growing my business. And that's why I hired him. I hired him to grow my business. Well, when I talked to our operations manager, he thought he was knocking it out of the park because he was doing his job description. He had it 100% dialed in. He had no idea that she had this expectation around growing the business and what that actually looked like. So there's no way he could win in his role. It shows the whole team what each role will do to grow the business. And it makes the accountability conversations easy. So I want to talk about 411s for a minute. And there's lots of different tools we can use for these accountability conversations. I want to talk about the 411 because it's the one that we all tend to know the best. And operation people really struggle with the 411s because what they use it as is a task list. Like, this is everything I'm going to accomplish this month. This is everything I'm going to accomplish this week. That is not what a 411 is for. The 411 is to identify what your KPI is, break it down into a monthly goal, then break it down into a weekly goal so that it makes the accountability conversations easy. All we're doing is looking at that KPI. And are we achieving that KPI or are we not achieving that KPI? And if we're not achieving the KPI, I gave you guys the coaching questions to ask, right? What can we do differently that we would achieve the KPI? Who do you need to be able to achieve the KPI? What systems and processes do we need to look at for you to achieve the KPI? When we focus on KPIs, it causes everyone to think differently about their role on the team. It causes everyone to realize that everybody is just as important as anybody else, and it keeps everyone focused on the success and the growth of the business. Now, this all sounds really simple, right? Let's all just come up with KPIs, hold each other accountable to them, and we still have the day-to-day business we need to take care of. So it's finding, how do we get those two to work together? How do we get them to mesh? How do we stay up with the day-to-day and still accomplish the KPI that becomes the trick? All right. So this is just one of the many topics that's covered in the Director of Operations 30, 60, 90. If you'd like to know more about that or operations coaching, you can scan this QR code, or you can visit mapscoaching.com, or you can email me at coachingwpaula@gmail.com. And again, any questions you guys have, any clarification you would like, feel free to email me and I will answer any questions that you have. Thank you all and have a very happy New Year.